Hey everyone, we will start in just 1 second as we wait for some folks to come in. And I did enable the chat. If you want to type in just in the chat where you all are coming in from, that way we know where everyone is throughout the US, throughout the world, and we'll get started in just 1 minute. All right. Wow, a lot of different places. What's up? Harrisonburg, Canada, Chicago, Michigan, Halifax. Wow, a lot of people here. Isn't the internet great? Unites us all. Um, so let me start. My name is Rob Koyfin. I'm the founder CEO of Koyfin. I also have with me here Connor, who helps out on the product side. And if you follow our Twitter, Connor is the person running the Twitter account. So if you see all the kind of smart charts about markets and different publications and things, that's Connor doing it. So very involved in the product and the content. And if you don't follow our Twitter account, definitely recommend that you do that. We post a lot of good stuff there. It's at Koyfin Charts on Twitter. Just a couple of housekeeping items here before we get started. So this webinar is being recorded. You will all be sent a recording after the webinar. So because you're on the webinar, that means you registered. Anyone who registers for the webinar will get a recording of the webinar. And so you don't have to jot down notes and you could pay attention. And if there's something that you missed, you could go back to the recording and sort of review that at your own leisure. I'm going to be focusing a lot of today's webinar on model portfolios. Model portfolios feature is a really important feature for financial advisors. It's something we rolled out last year and have had a ton of traction and uptake on. And we've continued to roll out new features and new functionality for model portfolios. So I wanted to cover those new enhancements, as well as sort of just start from the beginning of this is how you create a model portfolio, because we do have a bunch of folks that are just starting with Koyfin. I also want to mention that if you don't have a Koyfin Pro account, if you're on the free plan or the plus plan, you won't have access to model portfolios. However, if you email our help desk, help@koyfin.com, I'm sure Conor will put that in the chat as well. We can give you a 7-day free trial, no questions asked, don't require your credit card, and we'd be happy to enable you for a trial if you wanted to try the model portfolio functionality or anything else that's in the Pro feature. So definitely feel free to take us up on that, and we'd love for you to give it a whirl before you buy. So without further ado, let me share my screen and sort of go through some of the workflow that we have in model portfolios here. And I'm just having some trouble with my screen here. I'm going to share my screen. Great. So I hope you all could see my screen. This is the homepage of Koyfin. Model portfolios are located right here under the model portfolio section on the left-hand side. These are a bunch of different model portfolios that I have created already. So this is my model portfolio manager. If you wanted to create a new model portfolio, all you would do is click over here on the Create New button. And let me walk you through kind of how to create a model portfolio real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a aggressive portfolio, aggressive growth portfolio. And here you have the option of either inputting weights or notional. So this is going to be where you input the actual weights and your position. So if you kind of choose notional, you could input the dollar amount. If you do weights, you could input the percentages. If you do choose notional, you cannot do historical notional currently. So that's a workflow that we'll be working on in the future. Today, if you wanted to have historical allocations or rebalance periods, or different allocations, you would do the percentages, rebalances, or something else. And so I'm going to choose weight here. My initial value is going to be $100,000. I'm trading in US dollar currency. We just launched Canadian mutual funds as well. So to the extent I saw somebody dial in for Canada, to the extent you're located in Canada and you're our neighbor to the north, that's great. Welcome. We do allow you to track this portfolio in Canadian dollars and have Canadian positions here, but I will use US dollars as my example here. The benchmark here, you can select an ETF, a mutual fund, or we give you the option of selecting a model portfolio as a benchmark. And so what that means is you can create your own custom benchmark. Um, if you have some benchmark internally that you're thinking about, if it's a 60-40 benchmark, then what would happen is you would go back and create another portfolio, which I've done already, so I'm not going to go through it. It's my 60-40 portfolio. It's 60% VU, which is my equity exposure. It's 40% BND, which is my bond exposure, and it's rebalanced daily. So this is my 60-40 portfolio that I have here as my benchmark. And then when I'm, oops, and I lost my I think I lost my aggressive. My portfolio here that I'm creating is going to be 80-20, is going to have a benchmark that is the 60-40 portfolio. So that's going to be my benchmark that I'm thinking about. Um, the date here, I'll show you in a sec how it works, but this is how you choose the start date. The default option is first comment, so I suggest you leave it at that. My rebalance period, let's put to quarterly, and my annual fees, let's say I charge 0.5%, and I collect that fee quarterly, and so that's going to be over here. And this is where I actually start inputting the position. So I can input the positions here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a 80-20 portfolio. I'm going to create a VU position, and I'm going to create a QQ position, and then a BND position, and a BND X position. Cool. You know what? I'm just going to collect. I'm just going to do BND X here. And so VU I'm going to put as 40, and QQQ I'm going to put as 40, and then my BNDX position I'm going to put at 20. And so this is now my portfolio. It says here my allocation is 100%. I'm just going to go back to this first comment period to show you how it works. So based on these holdings today, VU, QQQ, and BNDX, my first comment date for when all these holdings exist is 2013. I believe BNDX is something that only started trading more recently. If I delete this and put in BND as my portfolio here and put 20%, so you can see here my first comment date, which is automatically generated, now starts in 2010. So this is automatically adjusted. If you wanted to explicitly start the start date somewhere else, you could do that over here and choose custom, and then choose your start date to whatever you want it to be. I typically, or most people typically, use first comment and just start it kind of the first day where all the funds exist together. And then the other thing that you could do is you could change your allocation historically. So this is kind of like my current allocation, and by definition, it would be my allocation on 2010 rebalanced quarterly. But what I can do is I could add another period here, and I could say, hey, in 2018, at the end of 2018, our firm actually was more aggressive, or got more aggressive on technology, because we thought technology is going to do well. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to change this to 30, and I'm going to change this to 50. And so it's still an 80-20 portfolio in terms of equities versus bonds, but now it's more levered or more geared towards equities, because historically we have a track record in our firm where we change the model every quarter, and this was an allocation change that we made to this model portfolio. So I'm gonna have this here. So 2010 portfolio starts in 2018. We made a new allocation change, and so starting in 2018 till today, this is the new allocation that's going to be present in the portfolio. I'm going to hit create portfolio. It's going to do its magic, and then it's going to kind of spit out all the analytics here. And looks like something here is not, let me see here, not working as intended. Okay. So for some reason, those cells were blank, and hitting refresh always helps when when something isn't as expected. So these stats now filled in. So now this is my analytics for my model portfolio. I have my aggressive growth portfolio. I have the benchmark here. I have some high level metrics. I have the holdings table of what I own, the target weight and the current weight. So you can see here that my exposure to QQQ is much higher or a little bit higher than my target weight. And that's because Q's technology has done well. And then at the end of the quarter, at the end of March, that's going to get rebalanced back to the target weight. But because my rebalance period is quarterly, that's what it looks like. And I have my matrix here or my pie chart here of what the allocation is for this portfolio. We then have a exposure page where you have, this is something that we introduced recently, you have a lot of information here in terms of what is actually represented in this portfolio. What are the exposures of these portfolio outside of the simple, like, hey, these are my 3 holdings, but what do these holdings actually have? And so this tab gives you all that information. And so my asset allocation is, as we know, currently it's about 82% equities and 81% equities, 19% fixed income, a little bit of cash. And we also show you the benchmark here. So the benchmark is my 60-40 portfolio. It's obviously at 60 and 40. This gets rebalanced monthly, I believe, or daily, I believe. So this is a little bit off the weights, and it does have some cash in here because I do own it through ETFs, and the ETFs do have some cash. So these are my high level exposures. The other thing that you can do is here, once you click on kind of like one of these cells, you can notice that the right-hand side gets updated. And what that right-hand side does is it gives you the breakdown or the contribution of each one of these cells. So for example, my equity exposure here is 81%, but how do we build up to that 81%? Well, I have Qs and I have VU. This is my portfolio weight. The exposure to whatever I clicked on in QQQ is 100%. So both of these are equity ETFs. And so my portfolio contribution is 50.7% and 30.4%. So if you add up these numbers, that adds up to the total weight here of 81%. If you look at the equity sectors, maybe that's a little bit easier to understand in terms of how that works. So on equity sectors, I could see that technology here is 43% of my portfolio. If you look at the Qs, technology is 50%. If you look at VU, technology is 30%. My exposure, my weighting is 50 and 30, and the contribution to the portfolio is 32 and 11. And if you add 32 and 11, it gets you to my 43% exposure in the portfolio to the technology sector. So you could actually drill down on each one of these components, on each one of these exposure components, to really understand what's driving that exposure, what's driving that contribution to your portfolio to that specific factor. The other thing that I would mention is you could sort by different values here. So right now I'm sorting by exposure. So that means my highest overweights are here and my underweights are at the bottom, but you could also sort by over underweight. And so here I can then quickly see where am I overweight, underweight versus the benchmark. At 43%, I'm overweight technology by 13 percentage points. That's one of the biggest kind of overweights I have. And then the other kind of 2 bets I'm making, or maybe the biggest bet I'm making, is that I'm underweight financial. So this is kind of important if you really want to understand how you're differing or what the differentiation is versus a benchmark. We have this exposure by region. And so by region, you could then kind of select equity, fixed income, or all on the chart. So my equity exposure here is around the same for the benchmark, very US focused. But if I look at, I guess I have BND, not BNDX, but it'll be around the same. But if you have some kind of international exposure or you're comparing versus a more international benchmark, then these regions are going to come into play. Similar to country exposure. And now we get into some fixed income exposure. So this is going to be my really my fixed income allocation to different parts of the fixed income market. So I'm overweight government debt. I'm overweight corporate debt. I'm kind of way underweight cash and cash equivalents, which is kind of like what's in my benchmark. And if you wanted to look at that on a more detailed level, we have a further breakdown here. And then on credit quality, it's very similar. So I'm sort of 70 or the majority of my portfolio is in AAAs, and then not a lot of stuff in the lower credit quality names. And then very similar for maturity. I could see what I have exposure to in terms of maturity and duration. Here, I probably want to sort by name, which makes this sort by kind of the lowest duration to the highest duration. So I could see just kind of like eyeballing it here that the duration distribution is very similar for the two things, and that actually, remember, my 60/40 portfolio has a BND, and my portfolio has BND. So actually, that's probably not the best example to show the differences because it's the same ETF. Actually, let me change this to BNDX just to show you what it looks like. So I'm just gonna change this to BNDX on the fly, which is a little bit different. And I'm gonna make this 20. I'm gonna make this 20, and I'm gonna save changes. I'm going to go back to that exhibit. And so you can see here the exhibits now for fixed income are going to look much different or a little bit different. In terms of government bonds, it's my same allocation. It's my allocation now versus a lower ratio for the benchmark because now I have a different kind of allocation. And then my credit quality is now way more overweight. Well, let me sort this by name. Oh, perfect. It's way more overweight, kind of the a little bit lower on the quality spectrum because I own more international stuff, and international debt tends to be a little bit riskier. And then on the maturity side, you can see here this is kind of the lowest to highest. The I in my portfolio tends to be much more overweight, sort of in the middle and the lower end of duration, whereas the benchmark is much more overweight, kind of the higher duration. So this obviously doesn't tell you what to do, but gives you a really good understanding and a really good feel of what's happening in a portfolio, what the underlying factor exposures are, credit exposures are, and really helps you just understand what's driving and what tilts you're making, which is always helpful for your own process and helpful to communicating to your clients when you're having that discussion with them. The next part, I want to show you the performance chart. So this is the performance chart of the portfolio versus the benchmark. So if I look at kind of like my entire performance since 2013, we're up 280%. The 60/40 portfolio is up 150%. We're just super overweight tech, which makes sense because tech has been doing really well. So that portfolio has been outperforming. You can also look at it on a rolling basis instead of the absolute performance. So what this is going to show me on the 1 year basis, my portfolio versus the benchmark. On a 3 year basis, my portfolio versus the benchmark, and then on a 5 year basis, my portfolio versus the benchmark. So just in with the benefit of hindsight, on a 5 year basis, this portfolio outperformed the benchmark at every single point since 2018. I see 2018 is the first year we have 5 year performance, and ever since then, even in the drawdowns, we've had really positive or good performance. The historical chart is something that shows you kind of just the performance by different periods as well as the performance by month and by year. So just kind of if you wanted to hone in on, let's say you're talking about 2020 and you're thinking about kind of what happened during the COVID drawdown or what happened in different periods, you have that ability here with this kind of carpet matrix. And then the risk metrics page, the last page, a little bit more quantitative, gives you just a sense of the risk of the portfolio versus the benchmark. So these are all your high level quantitative risk metrics for returns and standard deviations, and more in-depth and advanced metrics like the Sortino ratio or the information ratio, and then what it is for the benchmark. So for example, here, even though my portfolio has done better, the standard deviation of the portfolios is higher. It's about 13% versus the benchmark versus 9. So we are taking more risk in this portfolio, but we're getting a significantly higher return, almost kind of 4.5 percentage points or 4 percentage point higher return for about 3 percentage point of risk. So, but this is where you can actually understand your return, your risks. This is the drawdown graph. This is kind of showing you what the drawdown has been of these two assets over time. Again, to just give you a sense of the different episodes and what the expected or previous drawdown has been. This is a table representing this data. And then we have some stress tests in terms of different periods of market drawdowns, how the portfolio has done, and give you a sense of a stress test. So that's the analytics we have in the portfolio page. One thing I'll note is I created a new portfolio here, so I actually inputted the values. What you can also do is you can upload a CSV. So if you wanted to upload a CSV with either the current holdings or the historical allocations, you could do that as well. I recommend you pull down this CSV example here, which will show you kind of what we expect the format of the CSV to be. But that would be if you have your allocations and your trades historically in percentage terms, then you could just upload that to Koyfin, and we would register that for you immediately instead of you having to type that out by yourself. The other things I wanted to mention is that we do have a sharing feature. So if you have a portfolio, you're working with a team, you could share that with your team. So for example, Eddie's on my team here. And if I add Eddie, I can add Eddie and I could make Eddie an editor or a viewer. Viewer means they could just see the portfolio. Editor means that they could actually change and make changes in the portfolio. And this is my way of revoking access. So really a great way to kind of work together as a team. And then we also introduced a My Notes feature, where the My Notes feature is you can sort of write certain things down here. So let's say March 7th, 2024. We had a meeting and left allocation unchanged. And if I knew how to spell allocation, that would be helpful. So I save those changes. I X out of here. Next time you come back here and you hit My Notes, that message is going to be here. So these notes are going to be individual to the portfolio. So if I go to another portfolio and I hit Notes, that's going to have different notes than kind of my portfolio. So that My Notes feature is pretty good and should be pretty useful as well. Sorry, just taking a sip of water here. Let me kind of show you the latest kind of feature that we have for model portfolios or what we did. A lot of folks have asked about comparing model portfolios. So if I have my model portfolios here, how do I compare the performance on a graph? And what we did is we enabled these model portfolios to be used throughout Koyfin. And so if you've used kind of some of the other parts of our platform before, you know that we have pretty good graphing and really nice watch list functionality. So now you can have model portfolios in graphs down here. So in security analysis, where I have my security, you could input kind of a stock or ETF or mutual fund. We now have this model portfolio section, and let me input my aggressive growth portfolio. So that's my security. So now I could graph it, and now I could look at different things. So this is what we call the performance graph. What this does is it normalizes the performance from 0 to kind of the percentage change on different time periods. So if I want to look at this on a 3-year or 5-year or 10-year basis, it'll show me the performance. This is the total return. It also gives me the annualized return. So if I wanted to do 1 year or 3-year or 5-year, whatever it is, it'll automatically give me the total absolute return, and then the annualized return, which is the CAGR. So I know what it is over the 5 or 10 years or whatever it is. And so in here, you could add other securities. So if I want to see how aggressive growth did versus NASDAQ, I could put that in here. If I wanted to add another model portfolio, let's say I have my benchmark that I want to add here. Let's say I want to add my global portfolio. Let's say I want to add my income portfolio, whatever it is. You could add all the portfolios here, and they would all appear here. And then you can also zoom in, zoom out with your mouse. So this is a quick way to change the time frame. You could change the time frame here if you wanted to, for example, look at just maybe the COVID episode, so 2020 to 12/31, 2020. So just kind of like looking at the period where COVID happened, you could do that as well. So a lot of flexibility here. And if you wanted to kind of send this to a client or send this internally or whatever it is, You can hit the share button, generate this image. You can also paste your logo here. So let me kind of like customize and paste my logo here. I don't know what logo I have. Let's see here on my desktop. I have my, oh, let's assume that I worked at Hightower. Apologize if you don't, but let's say I worked at Hightower. I could have my logo here. Now I could copy this image, or I can well, I could copy this image and hit done, or I can download this image. Embed this image is a little bit kind of like more complex if you wanted to embed it on a website, but I could download this image and kind of have this portfolio now to share in a graph. So that's the performance graph, which is probably going to be the number one or the most used tool because folks love looking at performance. But let's say you wanted to look at drawdown or you wanted to look at beta. You could do that in the historical graph. So if you think about the performance graph, that's the total return graph. That's where we show you the total return of anything that you're graphing here. The historical graph is a lot more versatile because you can graph any asset versus any other asset. So if I'm here on the historical graph, I'm just going to go to an unsaved template, which will kind of start you from scratch. Make sure you have line selected here on the price chart, because if you have candle, it'll look kind of funky. And so you want to select the line chart. And so that'll give you a nice line. And then let's say I wanted to look at the drawdown. I could kind of start typing in drawdown and select drawdown from peak. So now that will give me the nice little kind of drawdown graph here. And if you don't want it to be purple because you want it to be more red, you could do that here. And let's say I wanted to compare the price in the drawdown versus QQQ. I could add QQQ here, and that would sort of give me a similar line and drawdown. Maybe QQQ is a little too similar. Let me do, let's see, what's a good one? Let me do just like SPY, because it's going to be a little less tech focused. And so maybe this line instead of orange, because that doesn't look so great, I'll maybe do like a blue line or whatever it is. And then you could really kind of compare the drawdown of blue versus red here. And you could change the colors to whatever you want them to be. So that's drawdown. You could also do things like beta if you wanted to understand the beta of the portfolio versus something else. So in here in my options, I would select kind of the ticker that I want to look at the beta. So versus QQQ, QQQ, and then 252 days of the year. That's trading days. So this would be the beta of my portfolio versus QQQ over time. And so that might be kind of like an interesting way to understand the sensitivity of my portfolio versus tech. If you wanted to understand the sensitivity versus oil or something, you could just type in CL1 crude oil, and that would recalculate the beta as well for the portfolio. We also have other series that you could use, like correlation. So if you want to understand the correlation of the portfolio with something else, you would again type it in here and then adjust your settings to understand kind of how you want to view it. And then I think the last thing that you might want to do on the G chart is, again, because it is so flexible, you could add other assets. So if you have a conversation with a client or you're trying internally to understand how a portfolio behaves, for example, versus US 10-year rates, you could type in US 10-year in here and then put this on a separate graph, and then look at these two instruments together. If you wanted to look at the US yield curve, so let's say I wanted to look at the 10-year versus 2-year, I could do that as well, and look at it historically and see kind of like how this portfolio behaves as we have a flattening or steepening. If you wanted to look at, let's say, CPI and understand how this portfolio behaves versus inflation, this would be a quick way to do that visually and really understand if one has an impact on the other. And we have every single economic indicator in the US and globally, so you could look at it kind of versus anything you want, depending on what your conversation is and what kind of portfolio you're looking to create. So that's on the graphs. The last thing that I want to cover is on the watch list. So these more model portfolios can be viewed in a watch list now. So if you wanted to, this is, let me just delete this watch list here. I'm just going to create a new one. So if you created a new watch list, you can now select these model portfolios as inputs. So this is my aggressive growth, balanced, benchmark, growth, global growth, whatever it is. And the columns here that you can select now are going to be very much performance columns. So it's not going to have like market cap or sector, but if you wanted to look at the performance, that's available here. We are going to be introducing over the next week more columns that you can view. So, for example, like relative performance or upside down, downside capture, all those metrics we have in the risk exposure tab are going to be available for you as well. Right now, it's only the total return one. So if I wanted to look at kind of market data, price and performance, and go down here and look at total return annualized, and look at 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15 year, and I'm just gonna make sure that this 5 year is here. So now I have kind of like my portfolio with all these return metrics. I think some of these portfolios didn't exist 15 or 20 years ago, so we can't calculate the metrics. But to the extent your portfolio has the performance and was created to encompass this performance, it's going to have all these metrics. So what you could do then is sort by these metrics. You could also add other assets. So if I wanted to add another group called, let's say my ETFs, you could track your ETFs in here as well. So like if I wanted to add SPY and QQQ and others, that would be here. And let's say I wanted to add mutual funds here as well. And I wanted to add ALDX and FMAGX and kind of some other mutual funds. You could do that as well and have this really quick way and easy way to compare. So those are the kind of like model portfolio overview. Some of the new features that we've released. Hopefully, that's given you a good idea of what we have now. I will pause there, take another sip of water, and see if we have any questions. So I'm just going to read this question out loud. Regarding currency selection, it is common for Canadian investors to hold both CAD and US dollar securities in a portfolio, but want to see their performance in Canadian dollar terms. Does Koyfin model portfolio tool account for the currency impact on foreign currency holdings in a portfolio, or simply report the local return on all local securities? Kent, we do account for the currency conversion. So, for example, if you're creating a portfolio in Canadian dollars, and let me kind of go back here and show you what I mean here. So, if your model portfolio here is in if your model portfolio here is in Canadian dollars and you put SPY in here, that's kind of like the point of this currency portfolio currencies. It'll convert the returns, the daily returns, into the portfolio. So there will be a portfolio impact. Sorry, there will be a currency impact on your portfolio to the extent that your portfolio currency is different than the security currency. So the answer to your question is yes. It'll convert the security currency into the portfolio currency and show that kind of like currency gain loss and not just show the local return. If you have any other questions or wanted to kind of double click on that, just feel free to email our help desk and we can answer you in more detail. Rags wants to know, how's it going, Rags? Thanks for your time again this week. What Rags wants to know, would be cool if we could add withdrawals 2,000 a month coming out of cash balance of a portfolio to show the historical risk of running out of money or the impact of having a more conservative portfolio for clients in the distribution phase if they're all equity going into retirement, and or other option to not reinvest dividends and rather withdraw them to show passive income of a portfolio. So, Rags, I think you're asking a little bit more now, a question on a workflow related to financial planning and financial planning with kind of cash flows and actually having balances and dividends and allocations, which is a super important question. It's also a topic that we are going to get into, just not right now. So right now, our functionality is really related to a model portfolio and performance. I think kind of the questions you ask about, which are more financial planning questions, and I think other financial planning softwares do right now. That's that's probably kind of like where most folks will do that. Having said that, we are gonna get into those sort of things, just not in the near term. So and the reason is just the financial planning workflow is there's a lot to it, and it's a lot different than the portfolio kind of management workflow that we're creating right now. Um, Kent wants to know, I would appreciate any insight you can provide into the roadmap for the model portfolio feature. For example, ability to analyze ESG characteristics of a model portfolio or analyze exposures between two model portfolios holdings overlap. Great question. I wanted to kind of touch on that in terms of upcoming releases. So let me kind of like share what we have on tap for things in model portfolio land that we're working on. We are right now working on X-ray look through, so the ability to really understand which stocks are being held by a portfolio and looking through the ETFs and mutual funds to actually see the underlying stock exposure. So that's what we're calling X-ray. I think some of our competitors call it X-ray. So we're working on that. We're also working on the ability to basically create a model portfolio from other model portfolios, what we call sleeves functionality. So we're going to allow you to basically input a model portfolio as a holding in other model portfolios. So that's something that we're going to be working on as well. Another thing that we're working on is integration with custodians. We'll be working with Schwab and integrating with Schwab first. We're going to expand that out to other custodians and other portfolio management system tools like Orion. And so if there are any integrations that you want immediately, please email us, help at koyfin.com, or you can paste it even in the chat and we'll make a note of that. So we'll be doing that. And then the other big thing we're working on is kind of reporting and creating reports from model portfolios. So the ability to really compare a model portfolio versus another model portfolio, or model portfolio versus a benchmark, or be able to kind of create a client proposal tool for a potential client and provide some perspective on the different characteristics of where you think problems are, where you think the changes need to happen. And so I think that may be the kind of the answering your question, analyze exposure between two model portfolios. That's going to happen in the reporting tool. In terms of ESG, that's not something that we are focused on. It's not something that we hear too often. If people on this call, if you folks care about ESG greatly, please let us know, because we want to hear that from our users. But that's not something that we hear very often outside of kind of the individual requests here and there. So please let us know. Again, help@koyfin.com. You can type in all caps in the chat that I want ESG, but that would be helpful if anyone else on the call if that's important to them. Adam wants to know, what about the standard Brinson attribution? Can we do that yet? Great point, Adam. Attribution is something that I wanted to mention that is going to be upcoming. We haven't started working on that yet, so probably a little bit down the line. I'm guessing probably in the summer, but that's something that we get asked about all the time, and we'll do that as well. Thomas wants to know, another currency question. Can you set an FX hedging ratio? I not exactly sure what you mean by that, so I'm going to say no. Basically our portfolio tools aren't advanced enough for you to say like, hey, I'm a Canadian investor, I own US assets, and I want to hedge them with 50% exposure or something like that. That's just way kind of more advanced than kind of like what our tool does and what our users want. So we don't have the partial hedging, and probably is not on our near-term roadmap. Adam Jordan wants to know, so I guess you're referring to another question. I think he's talking about how Portfolio Visualize allows you to show effect of withdrawals on a portfolio. Portfolio Visualize is not a financial planning tool. Cool. Adam, thanks for letting me know. I am gonna look into that and see if there's a way that we can do that more easily. So appreciate you bringing that up. I will look into it, and if it actually fits into nicely or fits in to kind of what we're doing, then we could certainly do that. I know, just we've had a number of conversations with advisors over the past 2 weeks in terms of how they communicate to their clients with proposals and reports. And one of the things that's come up is really a conversation that you all have with your clients about cash levels and optimal cash levels. And kind of some clients have too much cash and you want to get them to less cash. So showing them kind of like, hey, here's the impact on a portfolio. Here's the cash impact on the portfolio return, whether you're in 2% cash or 5% cash or 20% cash. So I guess that could be financial planning as well. But that's something that we heard from a couple of folks and we want to integrate into our reporting tool. So that's all to say, Adam, thank you for letting me know. And I will look into how Portfolio Visualizer does that. William Hoover wants to know, have you spoken to LPL about integration? So William, we've spoken to LPL. We spoke to a fellow named John Rays and Robert Petterman, I believe. If you want to reach out to them and tell them how much you love Koyfin and how much you want Koyfin to be integrated into LPL, that's something that would be helpful for us in terms of moving our case forward. I think those conversations are happening internally at LPL. So to the extent any LPL folks are on and want to sort of harass internally and badger them about getting Koyfin onto platform, that would be appreciated and helpful and would probably move the needle and help out with that integration. Adam is saying Orion integration would be clutch. We definitely hear Orion all the time, so we'll definitely put that on the list. I think when we're ready to integrate with Orion, we're going to need some of you to kind of email them and say, hey, Orion folks, we want to integrate with Koyfin. Because I think the way they operate is they really wait for the clients, for their clients to email them and say, I want this integration. So we'll need you all to kind of reach out to them, because if we reach out to them, they're going to say we need our clients to do it. So just heads up when you hear from us asking you to do that, or if you want to do that proactively, that would be great as well. Andrew wants to know, why is there a 1-day delay in tracking model portfolio performance versus a benchmark? That's a good question. So let's see what the best way to explain this. The model portfolio functionality is meant for a use case where folks are creating model portfolios typically from ETFs and mutual funds, and they're not typically using stocks. And so obviously with mutual funds, they're end of day. ETFs trade live. The way that kind of like our system works, and to keep all the performance in sync, what we decided to do in the beginning was to make it end of day. And that was just an easier way for us to release the product faster. What we're finding is some folks have asked, especially those that are managing ETF portfolios or managing stock portfolios, they want live or kind of like instant prices or instant performance. And we'll think about ways to do that. We are creating a new function called Portfolio Analytics, which is more geared towards equity investors. So to the extent that you're managing an equity portfolio, that's going to be live. That's going to be available with kind of like real-time data and telling you what performance was. But just as a background, that's why it was just much simpler for us to release something that was end of day and has a cutoff and has a standard cutoff with mutual funds and ETFs. So, for example, the complication would be, what do you show when you have ETFs and mutual funds in a portfolio, and some of the ETFs are up, but the mutual funds haven't moved? How do you account for the time? So there were just a bunch of complexities that we encountered when dealing with securities that are trading at different intervals. And so that's why we chose to kind of push that off and make a pretty simplistic decision to cut that off at end of day. But just as a background, probably TMI, but just so you know why we did that. Tyler wants to know, is there anyone at Cetera we can call and tell them we love Koyfin? Then let us know. Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate that. We will find that person at Cetera, and we'll let you know who to badger. There's probably someone there that is responsible for doing that. And Rags says the best way for Koyfin to get integrated with all our custodians' platforms is tell other advisors in your network to sign up. That way, Rob can go to a custodian and say he already has 200 advisors using the program. So he has something the custodian is not offering, but advisors need. Rags, this is why I love you. That's absolutely right. Tell all your friends, all your financial advisor friends, tell all your friends who are not financial advisors as well about Koyfin. But the more people that use Koyfin, the better it is for us, the more of a reputation we have. You all use Koyfin, so I hope you appreciate and can validate and vouch for how useful it is and how much better it is than some of the competitors out there. So to the extent that you can tell your friends and network about Koyfin, that would be greatly appreciated. I know you all are in a lot of chats that are financial advisor chats. To the extent that a discussion comes up about tools, we'd love a mention. To the extent that you feel comfortable posting something, we'd love a mention. But appreciate all your support, and we'll continue to build that functionality that you want to make Koyfin even better. So thank you.
Rob, I do have a few questions as well
Yeah.
that were initially entered into the chat instead of the Q&A at the start. So if we have the time. One of them comes from Adam, and he asks, do you have client-facing reports that focus only on portfolio holdings and exposures of a portfolio and excludes performance information? This would help comply with SEC marketing rule for unqualified clients.
Um, Great question, Adam. So in our reporting tool that we envision that we're gonna release, you will have, like, one of the things that we hear from our users is the current reports don't give you any flexibility to pick and choose what's in there. So that's one of the things that we're really focused on is creating a workflow where you can actually just choose what you want to display. So if you wanted to just display the holdings attribution or the X-ray or whatever it is, you can do that, and you don't have to put in the performance for whatever reason. So the answer is yes, we'll have that in the reporting functionality.
And I have another one here from William that asks about sleeves and are we planning to add those to models? The concept of like ag and sleeve. Yeah.
Yep. Was just having a conversation with Chris, if you're on, about sleeves. But sleeves very important. So this is something I mentioned in the upcoming release where you're able to build a model portfolio from other model portfolios. So that's on our roadmap. That should be delivered this quarter. So by the end of this quarter, that should be out.
Awesome. And then we also had another one from Alisher as well. I think we already covered the kind of granularity with the exposure exhibits, but they just said, what is the level that we can run drill through analysis to? Say if we have multiple ETFs in a portfolio, but we want to see what industries, countries, credit rating, etc. we have exposure to by looking at the portfolio in a deeper level by the underlying holdings. And then there was another follow-up from Kent that said, can you speak to any limitations in the current exposure drill down?
Um, so just going back to, I think kind of like we answered this we looked at this in the exposure exhibits, but the exposure exhibits kind of give you that ability to understand your overall sector exposure based on what's in your portfolio. So if I had in my portfolio XLB and let's say XLU, and I'm just going to delete allocation period to make this a little quicker. And I'm going to equalize the weights just to make that a little bit easier. So if this was my portfolio, now I have some ETFs here, and I just zoom windows everywhere. Save changes, although it's not going to be aggressive growth anymore. So my all of a sudden my equity exposure, right, my underlying exposure changes pretty dramatically because obviously I have XLU and I have XLB. So my underlying exposure from the ETFs is going to be represented here. And then if I wanted to kind of drill down on what is causing or how do you decompose that exposure, I would click on utilities, and that tells me XLU, VU, QQQ. The exposure of utilities in XLU is 100%, and VU it's 2%, and QQ it's 1%. My portfolio weight is the following. So if you multiply this times this, that gives me my contribution. And so I could see how my 24.8% contribution is decomposed here. So I hope that answers your question. And sorry, Connor, what was the second question on the
The second part was just, can you speak to any of the limitations in the current version of model portfolios or exposure exhibits? I
Um,
guess.
yeah, the only limitation that I can think of to mention is if you have like single stocks. Single stocks are like we don't have No, we do have the, sorry, I was going to say we don't have factor exposure for single stocks, but we haven't. That could be another thing to mention. Sorry, is the style boxes are coming soon, so we're going to have style boxes. We're not going to have style box data for single stocks. It's only going to be for ETFs and mutual funds, so that's a limitation that I can think of. But if there's anything specific that you have in mind, then I can talk to that. But I'm not sure what other limitations. I guess maybe international ETFs we don't have data for, so ETFs outside the US and Canada, but no other limitations that I could think of.
That's great. I have a couple more from the chat, and then there's a couple in the Q&A as well.
Mhm.
Andrew asked, would you facilitate a bulk upload functionality for a model portfolio that had a 10-year of track record and multiple changes to target allocations each year? Also, can you support benchmarks that are actual indexes instead of ETFs and mutual funds and other model portfolios?
Yeah, so the question on uploading the data. So once you kind of like see the example, the CSV upload example, you can there is no limit on how many times you could change your allocation. So as long as it's in that format of we need a ticker, a weight, and the date. If you upload that to our system, it'll create the dynamic portfolio. And you could probably break it if you have like 100,000, allocation periods or something. I don't know what the limit is, but as long as it's kind of, several, maybe once a month is probably reasonable. But if you want to email our help desk, or if you want to try and upload that file, if it doesn't work, you could email us and we can help you or recommend some things. Um, so there's no limit that no reasonable limit that I can think of for historic allocations. Um, in terms of um, in terms of your second question on indices, we use ETFs as our benchmarks, or mutual funds, or model portfolios. The reason we don't have indices is just there's a pretty significant licensing cost to that. And so we're choosing just not to pay that cost, and we'll have those eventually, but not right now. Anything else for the chat from the chat? I know there's some Q&A stuff.
Yeah, and now we've just got Q&A.
Cool. So Mark has a question on Y charts. And so the specific question is, how does how does you know what? I'm going to stop sharing here because I know you all probably can't see me. How do I stop sharing? Stop sharing. Cool. So the question is, how does Koyfin compare to Y charts? So I think we're kind of like in a similar space as Y charts, Morningstar, FactSet, depends on your workflows. I know Y charts is used by a lot of advisors, and so I think has some decent functionality. I'd say with us, we're a newer product, and so we have a different view on what it means to have a good user interface. And so I think we're more user friendly. What I hear from advisors is that they're much more likely to use Koyfin in front of their clients because it's just much quicker to pull up information, to pull up graphs. And so just easier and more intuitive to use, and it looks more professional when kind of dealing with end customers. The other things are with kind of, again, because we're newer and we have different data sources. Y charts only covers US equities. We're kind of have global coverage to the extent that you're looking at stocks outside the US, like Tencent or Toyota, or if you're investing in stocks outside the US, or you're monitoring them. So we'll have that data. Y charts gets their data from Morningstar, their stock data. We get our data from Cap IQ. I'd say for equities, it's a much better source. And then, for example, we have a pretty good mobile app, again, because we're built on kind of the latest technologies. So we're able to deliver that pretty quick. And Y charts, I don't think has a mobile app, and so that would be kind of another difference. But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of common workflows together. And then the last thing that we hear from our advisors in terms of differences is the price. So Y charts, again, depending on your tier, is anywhere between $3,000 and $6,000 per year. And then Koyfin, our financial advisor tier, is $1,000 per year. So it's 70 to 80% cheaper. And so I think maybe Depends where you work, but maybe you could ask some users what they think of Koyfin versus Y charts that have used it before. I'm not a kind of Y charts professional, so wouldn't be able to go into too in depth in terms of workflows, but those are some of the things that I've heard from my users and clients. Um, next question comes from Kent. My question about limitations was specific to Canadian ETFs and funds. Sometimes they don't have the same underlying exposure available on analytics platform as US dollar securities. For example, XIC or VBOW are common Canadian ETFs. Um, Thanks, Ken. We will, I will look into that. We should have the exposures for Canadian ETFs, but I will double check. I will make a note and double check and get back to you. Um, Gabriel, hey Gabriel, can you keep updated the Koyfin feedback status and progress? I get the sense that you are working on way more things than written here, and people may have feedback. That's a good question. What is that link? Oh,
It's a link to the feedback board. And it's basically asking if we can more readily update when things on the feedback board are being worked on, when we've started making progress on it. Because I think maybe Gabriel's saying we will ship stuff and people didn't know we were building it and then it's just shipped. And so just keeping more the feedback board more updated generally.
yeah. I think that's a really, really good suggestion and a great point. We need to figure out how to communicate this stuff better. I think internally we're very focused on building stuff, and we are working on way more things than I'd say we communicate. So we just need to do a better job of communicating, and maybe maybe we'll have Connor kind of keep track of that sort of board either on the feedback forum or somewhere else. So thanks for that feedback, Gabriel, and thanks for your suggestions over the past couple of weeks on model portfolios as well. Um, Rags has a question on the question about limitations. I've been asking if there will be a contribution to returns performance function in addition to portfolio contribution. Oh, never
Yeah.
clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, Guillaume wants to know, sorry if you already answered that question. Can I upload external data sets, end of day pricing, going back to, so let's say 1900s, if I can get that data from other sources? Great question, Guillaume. That's on our roadmap as well, to allow users to create a custom data series. So I'm not sure what data series you have going back to the early 1900s. A lot of our users are using alternative data sets and are invested in alternative funds. And so we'll have the ability for you to upload a return stream, create a ticker, basically tell us what that ticker is in terms of what category it's in and some data about it, and allow you to use that ticker in a portfolio or in a model portfolio or be able to pull up a graph of it. So that's coming down the line. It's probably a little bit later on, but hopefully end of 2Q or beginning of 3Q. Mark says, thank you for your answer. Current Y charts user, but I'm always looking to update my tech stack. Thanks, Mark. If anyone wants to put in the chat quickly why they switched from Y charts to Koyfin, I know a bunch of you have, then that would be good. Probably should have done that at the beginning. That could be my opening question next time. But if anyone wants to email us a testimonial about why they switched from Y charts to Koyfin, and we'll get that to Mark and we'll email him the response and maybe even put it on our website as well. So yeah. Guillaume says, thank you. Refinitiv Data Stream has data sets going back to 1926 on cross asset indices. Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Guillaume. Once we have that feature, you'll be able to kind of input whatever data set you want into Koyfin and give it a name. Cool. Any other questions? Anything else? All right. Well, thanks all your time. Thanks everyone for your time on this afternoon. Really appreciate your support. Today's March 7th. It's actually Koyfin's birthday. So happy birthday to us. Thanks again, everyone. Really looking forward to all the stuff that we're going to be releasing later this year and talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.